Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain, for he had often been restrained with shackles and chains. But the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed before him, and he said at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it. Then he began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who was possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Good morning. I bring you greetings on behalf of Bishop Yehiel Curry, the Metro Chicago Synod staff, and the 180 plus congregations and the 80,000 plus members of the Metropolitan Chicago Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. This morning, I greet you with Jesus' joy. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Let me begin by being confessional this morning. I am a sci-fi movie buff. The movie The Matrix was a game changer for this type of genre or film. The Matrix was an avant-garde film that shattered the limits of cinematographic technology through its use of visual effects. But limiting the film to its special effects would be akin to limiting the gospel to its miracles. The word matrix, you see, means system. In the film The Matrix, for those of you who may not have seen it or don't remember it, in the film The Matrix, artificial intelligence, or AI, controls a post-apocalyptic world. In this new world order, machines run everything. In this world, AI feeds off the electromagnetic energy generated by humans in order to run the machines. Humanity's sole purpose is to be a battery used to feed the system. To accomplish this process with maximum machine-like efficiency, AI uses a support pod to keep the human body alive, but it keeps the mind in a state of a kind of comatose state, a dream state. That's the real world in the film The Matrix. But yet there is another world. It is the world of the matrix. The matrix is a sophisticated computer program hardwired directly to the brain of every human being. The matrix is a digital world, a simulated world designed by AI with the aim of occupying the mind and controlling the mind. It keeps people from attaining their highest purpose. Its primary purpose is to deceive humans into believing their minds are free when their bodies are captive. But like every system, the matrix has a weakness. You see, once a person becomes conscious and realizes the existence of the matrix, they can be liberated from it. They can re-enter the matrix on their own terms. They can manipulate the computer program, and in fact, they can become almost superhuman. They can dodge bullets, leap buildings, and punch through walls. Now, this morning, church, make no mistake, the reality of the matrix and the film The Matrix is that it is a critical analysis of modernity. For those who have come of age in the zeitgeist of an information economy, the online universe is both an exciting, fertile, and creative expression, but it has a ubiquitous, sinister element. Willingly and tacitly, we are all part of some kind of system. We exercise our citizenship in a democratic system of government. We allow the judicial system to enforce our laws. We are educated in school systems. Our economy is a capitalistic system. Even our churches operate in a religious system. At their best, institutions are designed for the advancement of humanity. However, every economic system, every state apparatus, and every power elite has an intrinsic spirituality for harm or for good, and can ultimately become dehumanizingly demonic. When the life of the individual is valued less than the life of the institution, that institution or system runs the risk of becoming demonic. When policy and politics that benefit a few at the cost of a particular group, watch out, it just might be becoming demonic. When preserving the position, power, and privilege takes precedent over the basic needs, a system can become demonic. Corporations, schools, and governments can become demonic. You see, what is good is what promotes human flourishing. What is evil is what diminishes it. We need only look to the words of Walter Wink, who writes, "The demonic in our time has a particular proclivity for institutional structures. It is as if the demons of the Bible grew up with us, and while leaving some of their smaller cousins to continue harassing individuals, they swell to the gigantic proportions of our transnational corporations, military establishments, university systems, and governmental bureaucracies. However, like a hand, a system can support or a system can hold you back. While systems are designed to help us realize our potential, they can also define the limits of life. Instead of serving you, you end up serving the system. At the very best, institutions are expressions of God's co-creative power with humanity in the world, but they're not gods by themselves. They are human contrivances. I remind you of the words of Immanuel Kant, who wrote, "Out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made." It's difficult to realize full God-given potential when you're caught up or held down by a system. In these post-pandemic, post-institutional days, we'd be well to watch out because whatever smacks of institution will be met with suspicion. Our theological task today for the preacher of the gospel, for the follower of the religion of Jesus, our theological task is to discern the Spirit. To do so, we must go beyond the traditional messianic mission of Christ to unveil the militant mission of Jesus. One cannot read this text without seeing the military innuendo. In this text, Jesus finds himself confronting a system The demonic system that Jesus confronts is none other than the brutal system of colonization of the Roman government, the so-called Pax Romana, the so-called Roman peace. The region of the Gerasenes, you see, was a territory that was possessed and occupied by so many different foreign armies that the people of the region may have been living with a kind of perpetual post-traumatic stress. Now, if the exorcism of the demoniac in the synagogue in Mark 1 symbolizes Jesus' power over religious authority, this exorcism represents Jesus' authority over the secular authority of Roman rule. So here comes Jesus. He's approached, he's met by this demon-possessed brother who is created in the image of God, who is created in the divine image. However, this vortex of humanity now symbolizes how the violence of the so-called Roman peace was destroying the hearts and minds of his people. His resultant condition is what Frantz Fanon calls a reactionary psychosis, a kind of post-traumatic stress. This brother's spirit is so completely infiltrated by the advance of the adversary, like many who have been pushed to the margin of the page of life. He lives on the edge of the community in a state of perpetual grief and mourning. A clinician would tell us this type of self-injury that we read about in this text is a way in which people cope with emotional pain, intense anger, and frustration. His self-inflicted injuries represent the pain inflicted upon his community. His body bears the grief of his people. His body bears the grief of his community. He's alive, yet he lives among the dead, and day and night and day, he weeps, he cries out, and his weeping is turned to wailing. He wails out in pain. Though he is dead to his community, in some ways, his realization of the oppression surrounding them may make him more alive than his community. A community whose acknowledgement of the root cause of his condition would be an admission to the presence of the oppressive systems that surround them, then requiring them to wake up and take action. There is not only the individual oppression and possession of this brother at work in this text, but there is also the collective possession of his community. In fact, there are so many forms of possession and domination at work here that the demoniac tells Jesus, "My name is Legion, for we are many." But while this brother may be dead to his community, I said, while this brother may be dead to his community, praise be to God, he's not dead to Jesus. Jesus steps into this demon-possessed brother's world. Jesus enters the matrix. Oh, I wish somebody would get a little excited about that. Jesus enters into the system. We can celebrate and rejoice in Black joy because we understand that Jesus steps into our reality. We find Jesus in the crucible of conflict. We can celebrate because God works both inside and outside the system. In 2021, people of color occupy leadership positions across this great land. People of color serve as leaders on the highest levels of corporations and governments. God placed them there to overcome the gravitational pull of internalized oppression and exercise God's grace to expose and exorcise the systemic powers of domination. Jesus exorcises this brother from the system and liberates him to himself. Jesus returns this brother to an active duty status. In verse 9 it reads, when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. They were afraid. You see, a person in their right mind is a dangerous person. A right mind, you see, produces a right belief, and a right belief produces a right action. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said that one of the issues of the church of his day was that the church of his day had a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. I wanted to let you know today that often the church has much orthodoxy, that's a right belief, but seems to be limited in the area of orthopraxis, which is a right action. When W.E. Du Bois wrote, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line," calling out de facto racism, he was possessed of a right mind. When Rosa Parks called out Jim Crow and chose to sit down rather than stand up, she was thinking clearly and possessed of a right mind. When young people of all color, all hues, called the nation's attention to the cycle of violence on Black people and marched on the streets chanting, "We are young, we are strong, we are marching all night long," they were possessed of a right mind. In this text, however, there is a far more insidious evil at work. We must acknowledge the collective possession of this man's community. You see, the same spirit that once possessed the man possesses this man's people now, possesses his community. And possessed with this lynch mob mentality, the community would take Jesus the liberator and throw him off a cliff. But thanks be to God, the Bible says that he disappeared into the crowd. The forms of collective possession are legion. Internalized depression of people of color and white fragility are forms of collective possession. Not acknowledging that the United States was built on stolen land, using stolen labor, is a kind of collective possession. If our desire is to be a light to the nation, we must first shed light on and call out the dark strata of our own communities of practice before talking about somebody else's community of practice. We must face the issues in our own communities of practice before encouraging others to do the same with theirs. Today we can celebrate Black joy because Jesus, heaven's hero, restores not only this brother, Jesus restores completely. Jesus restores us. Jesus gives this brother and us the authority to lift our voice. He restores his voice no longer with weeping and wailing, but he gives him a song that only he can sing. Like Isaiah before him, Jesus tells this now newly liberated freedom fighter to seek the salvation of the city. Jesus commissions him to go to the Decapolis, the 10 cities, and tell the people what God is doing. Jesus is saying to him, your story, your experience is valid. Whether you are in basic training or a full-fledged freedom fighter, God continues to give each of us a voice to collectively call out the demons that would possess God's people. Amen, and thanks be to God.